The threat of an EMP continues to escalate. Let's take a few minutes to talk about what this threat is and the things that we can do to prepare, which includes building our community.
Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Kylene.
And I'm Jonathan. Today we are excited to be back with Parker Twiss, and we're talking about the EMP threat and what that means. So Parker, introduce yourself to our audience for those who missed the first video, and tell us a little bit about this topic and where we can make some difference.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. I'm really excited. This is as scary as a disaster this is one I find quite interesting. For those who maybe missed the first video, you should probably go watch that. My name is Parker Twiss. I'm on the board of directors for the American Civil Defense Association. I've got a master's in emergency management and disaster preparedness. And ultimately, preparedness is kind of both my career and hobby and just general interest. For EMP, this is kind of one that kicked me in the butt to kind of start preparing. Back in the day, it's one that if anyone has heard EMP, they probably read the book 1 second after. And that's the one that kind of kicked me off for, oh, this might be a thing. And the more I researched, the more I went, I don't really like this. So for what an EMP essentially is, it is the byproduct of a nuclear detonation. It involves essentially radiation interacting with the upper atmosphere through something called the Compton effect. We're not going to go into that. But the end result is essentially it's highly charged energy that hits the electrical grid and devices in 3 pulses. You've got the E1 pulse, which these are the components of an EMP, E1 through E3. The E1 pulse, it's like a lightning bolt, but worse. Essentially, it hits all electronics, whether they're plugged in or not. There is not as much testing as to how vulnerable modern electronics are, but ultimately anything with a microprocessor is going to be vulnerable, especially those with antennas or that are plugged in. So the E1 pulse hits things that aren't plugged in even. They can be turned off, they can be turned on, they're still going to be affected. The E2 pulse is slower. That's kind of similar to a lightning strike in very, very, very general terms. The E3 is the slowest of these pulses, and it propagates and travels along power lines. So even if your device was off and maybe wasn't affected by the E1 pulse, now you have another one traveling along the power lines and hitting anything plugged in. And it's worth mentioning that these pulses will not directly affect you as a human unless you are relying on a medical device, an electrical medical device. These pulses, you won't even notice a difference. You might not even see a flash in the sky because it would be at such a high altitude. Just suddenly everything goes off. And that's ultimately the kind of result of an EMP is your cell phone doesn't work, power goes out, and you're kind of left there wondering, is this just a power outage or is this something worse?
And in a matter of a moment, we're become a third world country because the power isn't coming back on for a very long time. So what does that mean to society? I can tell you that this is Jonathan's biggest concern. When we talk about what we prep for an EMP because if we are ready for an EMP, we're ready for anything else, right? It's like the worst case scenario. So talk to us about what society would look like after an EMP.
Ultimately, it's kind of a societal reset. That's why it's such a scary disaster. There's no giant nuclear. It is a byproduct of nuclear detonation, so it can occur locally on the ground if there's a strike. But ultimately, the one I was referencing was a high altitude EMP where it interacts with the upper atmosphere and propagates down. In terms of society fallout, it's kind of absolute. That's the scariest part of it. Is there's no big glaring banner that's happened. It's just suddenly. There's no power, which means there's no refrigeration. There's no ability to refuel the trucks that transport the food. There's no way to refuel the combines that harvest the food. There's no way to keep the power plants running which is a whole separate scary thing for nuclear power. But water treatment plants will shut down. So there goes your clean water. So essentially, you take every single bit of infrastructure and just wipe it completely clean. What's scary is it would kind of be even worse off than a third world country because we don't really know how to live. It's at a level without our creature comforts. You go to countries which don't have reliable power, which don't have reliable water supplies. There's people who are perfectly happy there, living living very, very happy lives. We don't know how to do that. So when our system essentially is removed, people aren't going to know what to do. And that's the scarier part of it, is that's kind of the effect of it, is our society will not know how to function because everything our society is built on will essentially grind to a halt, be it transportation, food production, water filtration, everything.
That is sobering. It is
is.
sobering. And you mentioned 1 second after, and that was, I'd kind of tried to envision what EMP would do, but then that book opened a whole new set of insights, like, the whole medical world and care centers and the people that have maybe a drug addiction or some kind of an addiction that they can no longer satisfy. There's a whole mix of weird stuff that just makes it a whole different level of concern.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about what we can do to prepare for an EMP. What can we do so that we're ready if the lights go out for a very long time?
Well, there's ultimately kind of two main things, which is be self-sufficient, which is kind of the whole general, great, that'd be great to do, but it's a huge tall order, to say the least. Because this is a situation where you have to have the knowledge, and you can't just have supplies. You have to have the knowledge, because now, remember, there's no more internet. So you can't just Google search, how do I grow crops? What do I do if this happens? Unless you have localized backups stored in a Faraday cage. So for definite actions, having something stored in a shielded, essentially, be it hard, you don't even have to be shielded if it's hard copy. But for electronics, having those inside a Faraday cage, which is essentially a way to protect the electronics inside from the EMP pulse. The DIY solution is to wrap a radio or something in like cloth, or just leave it in a cardboard box and then wrap it with like 4+ layers of overlapping tinfoil. That's the poor man's Faraday cage. It'll work. The ones that I personally use are Mission Darkness, because they've got their test results published to military grade standards. But that's how you preserve at least electronics, be it a laptop, be it a hard drive, essentially for knowledge or entertainment, which again, you're going to be bored, having something to do and having that stored knowledge, because you can download Wikipedia as well. So having a way to access information is huge. So great, now you have the items stored. Now you have to have both the knowledge and the supplies. So you've got the electrical stuff set, but what about the food? What about the water filtration? What about medications, be it prescription or antibiotics? Because the minute the medical system runs out, which will be immediate, you're going to have to deal with infections, things that killed people before the invention of antibiotics, and still do now. You're going to have to know how to treat wounds, essentially all these how to do things, which is a tall order for a single person. So it kind of, I guess, the summarize of the kind of three biggest things would be store things in a Faraday cage as a subset of have easily a year's supply, which I know is a huge ask for a lot of people, and it's very, very daunting. But that's where you kind of need to chip away at it. Just 2 weeks here, a week there, and just build up to that. And the third thing would be to have a community, be it just your local family, trusted friends. Start building those connections, because that's how you're going to get through a disaster that completely, essentially resets society. Is have the people you can rely and trust on to get you through it, and that's both just for emotional support and for just division of labor for various tasks and expertise.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is a critical component of what we try and teach, is the value of community, getting to know your neighbors, getting to know your friends, finding like-minded people that you can work together with, because none of us has enough knowledge to do everything. I mean, we can't be doctors and mechanics and everything all in one package. I just don't think anyone can do that. But together, all of us can pull together information that we need, and whatever other resources to get us through these crises. I think community is where it's at.
We learned that very intimately when we went for 90 days without going shopping. It was like no out to eat, no shopping. We had to just live off of the food we stored and the food we could grow and anything we could barter. It was such an eye-opening experience for us, because one of the things that we didn't have was fresh milk, right? And when the ice cream ran out, our kids were really sad, no yogurt. But one of our friends has a milk cow. And so our 12-year-old at the time, this cute little boy, decided that he would go milk the cow and we would exchange it for fresh fruits and vegetables from our garden, because we don't have a place big enough for a milk cow, right? It's not a possibility for us. But it was really interesting to learn what you could do with barter. And there's all kinds of different things people say is important, But I think there's another reality of what really is important and how kind some people were. I did have one of my friends, because I ran out of chocolate, and she came and she said, I've never tried kale. Can I trade you some chocolate for some of the kale out of your garden?
I think that was cheating personally. But
I got my chocolate. But
Good trade.
yeah,
good
it
trade,
was.
good trade. But I think that learning to barter and developing those relationships now, because if we hadn't had those relationships in place before we did that challenge, it would have been a whole different scenario. And so we continually are trying to do that, build relationships with our neighbors and our friends. And I completely agree. I think that is one of the biggest things that we can do. I think it's important to know who you can trust, right? Because sometimes there's people that you need to kind of keep an eye on. And it's good to have developed those relationships now so that you know that.
Absolutely. The time to figure out who to trust and who to rely on is not when there's a disaster.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to be emotional. That's not the time. Ultimately, starting now, as you said, that sounds awesome. Just being able to cultivate and build those relationships before things really are serious, you can start to learn, and they can also learn from you. So it can be this back and forth exchange, which is exactly how kind of to do it. It's not necessarily to go just, befriend random people. And that might work for some, but ultimately it's to just friends and family, your neighbors, people who you talk with on a normal basis. Just see if that's something they're interested in. It doesn't have to be some big scary thing. It's just, oh, hey, what about this? And I'm not necessarily to initially just jump into EMP, because that's gonna bit of a loop there. But but if the power goes out, it's like, oh, hey, do you need to charge your phone? There we go. And that's just a very simple and kind of low kind of essentially risk to take, that you can be kind of like, oh, is this person interested in this sort of thing?
Yeah, some good entry strategies, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Parker. What else do you have to share with our audience about preparing for an EMP? Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Ultimately, it's certainly a scary disaster. Kind of the idea of a societal reset, that is not something to kind of even consider lightly. It's a huge but like many other things, to kind of just take it in bite-sized steps. Start with 2 weeks, work up to that year supply, figure out that community, and be like, oh, who would I really want to rely on? Who are my current friends that I can rely on? Who, is this something that I can approach with them? And ultimately start taking those preparedness steps with community and just storing supplies and acquiring knowledge, because a lot of knowledge is free. You can start your journey even without spending a dime.
And I think it's critical, and I alluded to this when I talked about 1 second after, especially people that may have medical needs, that, how can those medical needs be addressed in that kind of scenario? Figure out the ways to make it happen. It applies to every critical aspect of our lives, but that one especially jumps out to me is, okay, people who are on an oxygen concentrator, or, some other medical device that's electrically run. How do we take care of that?
And that's something that many people can figure out ultimately, like have ways of backup power. I mean, it's a tall order, and I'm not diminishing the kind of the challenge of doing so, especially for many controlled prescription medications. But I know there are companies that offer a year supply of many, at least common ones. And then for other medical things, something you got to do. You just have to do the best you can. You can't. You have to. It's like one of those things where you look too far and it'll be discouraging. But you go, okay, how do I solve this problem for even just 3 days? Okay, I've solved it for 3 days. How can I extend that to a week? Okay, I've got a week. How about 2 weeks? Okay, that was easy. How about a month? Okay, that was a bit harder, but let's see how I can extend that even more. Instead of just going immediately, oh, I rely on this, I can't do this. Here's the result. And again, this is speaking with a very broad brush. Everyone's conditions and situation is different. There's some things that are a lot more serious and do rely on a intact supply chain. And ultimately, it comes down to just doing the best you can. That is the kind of preparedness in a nutshell, I think.
Thank you for that. And I'd like to chime in with two things here. One is Jace Medical. I'll leave a link for them, but that is one of the great ways, if you can't get your primary care physician to help you get some of the medications and stash them, Jace Medical is a really good source for that. The second one is the American Civil Defense Association, TACDA. There is so much good information available on their site. The Journal of Civil Defense, if you want a hard copy, you have to pay for your membership. But if you just want to be able to read them, it's all free. It's all free online, and it's a great group to belong to. There's a lot of really good information. And we thank you, Parker, for your service on the TACDA board. I mean, that's really impressive. We really appreciate that because they do a lot of really good things.
Yes, they do.
Thank you. I'm the newest one there. There are people who've been doing it for decades, and they've got so much experience and expertise, and I'm still learning from them a ton. And so it's kind of me coming on here going, hey, how can I help? It's a pleasure to help. The organization is fantastic, and again, as you mentioned, offers so many learning resources for free, so people can start learning right away.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's great.
That's awesome. So thanks again for your service. And now for our audience, the question of the day: what other questions do you have for Parker about preparing for an EMP? And let's drop those in the comments. Let's talk about it. And thanks for being part of the solution.